Hello, it is me, Evan. I am here to teach you about the introduction to shell script programming, which is chapter 6 in the book Guide to Unix Using Linux. To start out with shell scripting, you need to preview your application, which is getting the main idea on what you're going to do in your head, get all the shell variables, and figure out symbolic names that you're going to need for your variables, and thinking of the structure of your program. Those all fall under previewing the application. It's what you should do before you actually begin to program your program, which starts the program development cycle. The program development cycle is the process of developing an application. The steps involved in the program development cycle don't change. They're always the same no matter what you're using. If you're using Bash or if you're using C++ or any high level language. When using high level languages, you can use languages such as Visual Basic, C or C++, C#. The definition of a high level language is a computer language that uses English-like expressions. Bash is not a high-level language, it's a lower level language because it doesn't need an interpreter when you use it to program any program you want. It acts as its own interpreter because an interpreter was meant to read the statements in a script file and immediately translate them into executable instructions and cause them to run. But the fact that you're using Bash, it acts as its own interpreter, so you don't have to find your own and actually use that. The interpreter that we use in class is VI, and well, that's the text editor that we use, and the way to access VI from your Bash script right here is to just VI and file name. Once you push enter, it'll come to your text editor where you can actually start to begin programming your program. Now once you've got all that all your codes laid out and everything, you're gonna need to give permissions to your script so that Bash knows that it's allowed to run it, or else it won't work. The way that you give permissions is using the change mode command, which is really easy to understand. You just type chmod for change mode, and you give the permissions that you want. 7 would be full permissions, and the 7 in this example is for the owner of the program, which is me. Then I'll put 1, which means people can only read the file if they're not the owner, which is exactly what I want. And then I'll just then you put your file name there, push enter, and it didn't work for me because I don't have a file called file name, but put the name of your Bash script in there and it will make it executable for you. Then after you make it executable, to be able to run it, all you have to do is type in the name of the file So, for example, I'd put file name, whatever your file name is, .sh for bash scripting, and push enter. And then it'll run your script as long as you've chosen to include your current working directory in the path variable. Another useful thing that bash is good for is to prototype your application before you actually move it over to a higher level language such as C++ or C# or just C. A prototype would be a running model of your application, which is helpful because it lets you preview or review the final results before committing to the actual design, and it allows you to make changes if there's anything that you don't like. In bash, there's things called comments, and comments, they help you just, if you use a comment, which is a £, it comments out that line on the VI editor so that it doesn't get compiled and you can write whatever you want. It's helpful for saying, putting a header and having like an author, and you could have one and be version number. It's useful for a lot of things. The most useful thing it's for is probably explaining your code as you're going through your program. You want to make sure you have good documentation, and in order to do that you need to put comments, and all you have to do is put a pound sign and then explain what your program does at that second. I talked about using shell variables and coming up with symbolic names. Variables have symbolic names, should have symbolic names. They represent values stored in the memory that you can use throughout your program. There are 3 types of variables discussed in this chapter, and they are configuration variables, environmental variables, and shell variables. Configuration variables are used to store information about the setup of the operating system, and after they're set up, you don't change them usually. Environmental variables are initial variables, they're variables that have initial values that can be changed and will be changed during the running of your program. Shell variables are those you create at the command line or in a shell script. They're very useful in shell scripts for temporarily or permanently using constants storing values. The shell operators is the next topic. The operators are used to assign a value to a variable. At least defining operators are. There are also evaluation operators, which are used to determine the contents of a variable, or you can use it to test conditions between 2 variables. And the equal sign is the most common operator that is used to define variables. In order to set a variable, you'd use you could use a definition operator, and to assign an operator, you just do use your variable name and then set it equal to whatever value you would like. And that's how you use the equal sign definition operator. An easier way to look at it, I guess, would be the value or variable name that appears. The variable name is usually on the left of the equal sign, and whatever is on the right of the equal sign is always assigned to what's on the left side of the equal sign. That way you know that whatever you put after the equal sign will be assigned to your variable name. Evaluation operators, there's a lot of them. There's equal to, not equal to, addition, subtraction. There's greater than, less than, obviously multiplication, division, and remainder. And those are the easiest of the arithmetic operators. The next thing I'm going to cover is redirection operators. The redirection operators, which is the greater than sign, completely overwrites anything in an existing file if the file already exists. You don't want to use that if there's important stuff in a file already and you're writing information to it, because it'll completely erase everything and then you won't have that record. They do have I'm pretty sure you can use double redirection operators and it will just append everything to the bottom of the file that you're currently working with, so that nothing in your file gets overwritten and you have all the original data that was in there in the first place, so you're not missing out on anything. I talked about modifying the path variable so that you could run your script just straight from your current working directory, and the only thing you need to do is in the place that your path directory is, which should be in order to add your current working directory to your path variable, you're just going to want to type period and a / and that adds your current working directory to your path variable, so that it looks for your scripts in your current working directory and will run them directly from there. I'll be back with the second half of this video to explain the rest of the chapter and whatever I haven't covered yet. Stay tuned.